Tolkien's Deadly Dragons. While the author of The Hobbit disliked allegory, his great thematic preoccupation with the struggle between good and evil remains as relevant as ever. For its 1937-38 Christmas lecture for children in the Natural History Society of Oxfordshire announced his forthcoming talks on coral reefs, bird, whale, horses, and dragons. The latter topic was taken up by J.R.R. Tolkien, a professor of English literature who had just published The Hobbit, an immensely popular book involving a dragon. Tolkien's lecture, before an audience packed with children of all ages, tackled a decidedly adult subject: the problem of evil in the world, and the heroism required to combat it. Tolkien began disarmingly with a slideshow of prehistoric reptiles, including a pre-pterodon in flight, to remind his listeners that science is filled with to remind his listeners that science also fills the past with dreadful monsters, many of the largest and most horrible beings of a distinctly lizard-like or dragon-ish kind. These ancient creatures, he said, embodied legendary qualities found in dragon mythology. The dragons with whom he had acquaintance loved to possess beautiful things. Greed and hatred motivated them, and how can you withstand a dragon's flame, and his venom, and his terrible will and malice, and his great strength? It probably was not lost on the children present that Tolkien's mythical dragons sounded a lot like the people who inhabited the real world. The adults might have discerned a more ominous message. Tolkien delivered his lecture on January 1st, 1938, nearly a year earlier, on January 30th, 1937. Adolf Hitler officially withdrawn Germany from the Treaty of Versailles and demanded that its colonies be returned. In August, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, in midst of the Great Purge, authorized mass executions for 750,000 citizens deemed enemies of the Communist Revolution. In December, Benito Mussolini, after brutally invading Ethiopia, pulled Italy out of the League of Nations. Tolkien analysis went deeper still, drawing on the epic English poem Beowulf. He said that the English people had a special insight into the moral significance of dragons. In the poem, Beowulf defeats the demon Grendel, Grendel's mother and fearsome dragon, but at the cost of his own life. Tolkien was fascinated by such tales, with their portrayal of the persistent wickedness, the danger of pride, and the value of historic sacrifice for a noble cause. One might say that the chief morals that such stories teach, or rather awake in one's mind, are shining in this story. He told his audience. These were not popular themes in a post-war English awash in pacifism and moral cynicism. In 1933, for example, students at the Oxford Union Society had famously approved the motion, this house will under no circumstances fight for its king and country. A veteran of Battle of Somme during the First World War, Tolkien nevertheless rejected disillusionment that seized the minds of many of his generation. He loved England and its cultural achievements without glorifying war or exalting nationalism. A few months before Tolkien delivered his dragon lecture, his publisher asked him to produce a sequel to The Hobbit. Tolkien was reluctant. "I cannot think of anything more to say about hobbits," and he replied. But of course Tolkien would have a lot more to say about hobbits, in part because the world around him seemed threatened anew by the appearance of dragons. Soon after Tolkien began writing The Lord of the Rings, the story took a profound sense of foreboding not seen in his earlier work. "But last night I told you that Sauron the Great, the Dark Lord, Gandalf the Wizard, explained to Frodo Baggins, the rumors that you have heard are true. He is indeed risen again. Always, after a defeat and respite, the shadow takes another shape and grows again. On October 13th, 1938, barely 2 weeks after Munich Agreement, which effectively delivers Czechoslovakia into Nazi's hand. Tolkien confessed to his publisher that news story was no bedtime fable. The darkness of the present day had some effect on it. In perpetual fight against demons, Tolkien suggested modern weapons should not be decisive. Something else was required. Dragons can only be defeated by brave men, usually alone, he said. Sometimes a faithful friend may help, but it's rare. Friends have a way of deserting you when a dragon comes. Politically speaking, those words would become something of prophecy after Hitler invaded Poland in 1939, triggering World War II. Britain's chief military ally, France abandoned his treaty obligation and signed a peace agreement with Germany. Britain's chief military ally, France, abandoned its treaty and obligation and signed a peace treaty with Germany. Many have assumed that Tolkien drew from this event in the 1930s and 1940s for his story about the Battle of Middle-earth, an epic struggle between good and evil. Under this view, the orcs represent the Nazi stormtroopers, and the terrifying dragons of Nazgul are like the German Luftwaffe and the Battle of Britain. Tolkien disliked allegory. The truth is that the catastrophic rise of fascism and communism merely confirmed his insight into the human condition, the nearly irresistible appeal of the demagogue and schemes for a utopian future, the insatiable will to power. For the dragon bears witness to the power of the dragon and malice that men find in the world, he said, and he bears witness also to the wit and the courage, and finally the luck or grace that men have shown in their adventures. Not all men, only a few men greatly. However dark the modern world might appear, Tolkien could never give up on older concepts of virtue, valor, duty, sacrifice, and grace. As he told his audience, dragons are the final test of heroes. If Tolkien is right, then what does that say about us? The lust to possess and subjugate is as strong and whispered as ever. Dragons continue to roam the earth. We seem to have a terribly difficult time, however, finding authentic heroes to fight them.